around, y'all. Come around. Y'all at the back, I want you to see this building. I want this building to see you. Come around. Resistance is justified. When people are occupied, 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 resistance is justified. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Woo! Let me ask you a question. Why do the rulers of this country support Israel? Why do Democrats and Republicans alike approve billions in aid to Israel and refuse to condemn murder and genocide? Why do they do it? Because our country was founded on murder and genocide and still uses them, still uses these tools to dominate its own people. Colonial wars are big money. Some of the wealthiest companies in the world are war contractors like Textron. Textron manufactures planes, helicopters, and armored cars. They manufacture the military devices used by the Israeli Defense Force and other occupying armies around the world. They make millions dealing in the business of death, and it's the same people raking in the cash that also lead the military and sit in government. That's bloody business, and it takes racism to justify it. The U.S. supports Israel because it supports its own racism. Our police train with the Israeli military because they share the same colonial agenda. The wealthy in the U.S., as in Israel, are making trillions of dollars off the backs of working people worldwide, and trillions more making weapons to kill them. You may have heard the opposite. You may have heard Israel isn't racist. No, Israel is just defending itself against racist Arabs who want to wipe out the Jews. But oppressed people are smarter than to fall for that. We know that racism is only used to make allies for wars that only benefit the rich. Racism is the tool of the oppressor, and it's useless to the oppressed. And that's true in the U.S. just as it's true in Palestine. The late, great black revolutionary George Jackson wrote, "The great majority of blacks reject racism. They have never found it expedient, wise, or honorable to take on the characteristics of the enemy. For blacks, a concern for the survival of the race is not, patently not, definable as racism." Doesn't this also describe the Palestinian people? Israel waged an 11-day siege on Gaza. Crowds marched in Jerusalem shouting death to Arabs. We may hear that there is a conflict between people, creeds, even civilizations. But are Jews and Palestinians attacking each other in the U.S.? Of course not. In this very crowd, we are here, Jews, Palestinians, and people of other backgrounds, together to stand up for Palestinian freedom. Jews are not the enemy of the Palestinian people. Israel is the enemy of the Palestinian people. Israeli settlers arm themselves with racist laws and ideology to justify theft, murder, torture, and genocide. When Palestinians fight back against Israeli violence, they are not fighting Judaism, they're fighting colonialism along with all the companies like Textron that profit from their oppression. People do not hate their oppressors because of their skin color or their religion. They hate their oppressors because they are holding a gun to their head. And our fight is not a race war, it's a class war. It's oppressors versus oppressed, and the oppressed outnumber the oppressors 99-1. We can only win freedom by fighting for equality in the face of oppression. Our enemy is not a race or a religion. It is any society where one group lives by exploiting another. So we need to stop funding Israel's apartheid state and its racist assault on Palestine. But we also need to go further, because Israel is not the only modern colony. Because people around the world are forced into submission by the US military. Because Israel and the US both survive on racism and war. Because colonial destruction is not a fluke under capitalism, it is the motor that keeps the car running. We know that it is not enough to pull US funding from Israel. We must bring US imperialism to its knees, along with the oppressive global system it supports. So our question is, reform or revolution? This is the choice that decides the future of humanity. We have to ask ourselves what life we want to live. Many of us may seem to have chances for advancement in the so-called land of opportunity. But if we look closely, our opportunities here are rotten with the same contradictions as in Israel. Israel says it's strong on women's rights because women and men fight side by side in the army. But is it women's liberation if an Israeli woman can slaughter a dozen Palestinian women with a single airstrike? Israel says it's friendly to LGBT people. It has its gay clubs and so on. Is it LGBT friendly to starve queer Palestinians and demolish their homes? Is it green for the Jewish National Fund to plant trees on stolen land? So again, I'm asking you, what kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to live a life where our kin of color in the United States, our comrades in the global south, our siblings in Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria are constantly under the gun to provide the bread we eat, the so-called freedom we hold so dear? Is that a world you want to live in? No! Do you want to live a life where the profit-hungry ruling class is prepared to wipe out all life on this planet rather than end their infinite wars for oil? No! When it comes down to it, we don't have a choice. We have to fight for a future where all survive. A future where we're not willed by the wealthy or the strong, but by the will of the people. In Gaza today, they're celebrating the ceasefire. This was won by the largest uprising in decades all across occupied Palestine. And protests from here to Colombia caused Israel to lose face in the media and in the US Congress. Today, we, the people, stopped the missiles. Tomorrow, we will end the occupation. Palestinians have been fighting for freedom for 73 years and more, and it's time to win the struggle once and for all. You and I, the people gathered here, we are fighting in the heart of the global empire, and it is our responsibility to defeat this empire so that Palestine may be free. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Are we going to rise up? Are we going to rise up? Let me hear you say it. Rise up. Rise up. Rise up. Free Free, free Palestine!
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 This is the power of the people! We're gonna march that way. We're gonna march towards Exchange Street. In front of Kennedy Plaza, we're going to stage a die-in. When you get there, stop. We'll follow the instructions. Many of you have been to a die-in before, but the world needs to see what the violence that is happening with U.S. backing looks like. Let's go. Banners to the front. Wait for the marshals.
Let's go!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free,